Mr. Saktiandi, Supaat.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I rise in support of the bill. It is indeed timely that this bill is introduced at a time when there is turmoil in the electricity market, which has resulted in licensed retailers throwing in the towel in Singapore. The price distortions disrupted the SGX electricity futures market, leaving the retailers in the cold as they could not hedge the exposure to the price volatility triggered by the rise in gas prices overseas. This certainly highlights the importance of Singapore ensuring that it has a strong infrastructure in place as part of our energy security. Much has been said about going environmentally friendly, and the power generation sector is certainly one big block. Decarbonizing electricity generation is important, and the GenCos need to move from fossil fuel to cleaner natural gas. According to the National Climate Change Secretariat, since 2000, the percentage of natural gas used in electricity generation rose from 19% to more than 95%. Hence, we have cut the amount of carbon we release into the atmosphere. But what is important is how do we manage this migration and ensure that it does not result in a hefty burden being put on the shoulders of consumers, from households to businesses and to town councils in the management of municipalities. As we know, on all fronts, costs are rising from construction, manufacturing to transportation, logistics and manpower. We have to also bear in mind that in the near future, we would be having higher GST and other taxes to add to the cost of generating electricity. The bill highlights the strategic move for Singapore to look at imports as the most viable option for decarbonizing the power generation sector in the near to medium term. We are already importing all our energy supplies, as we are told by EMA statement recently that the sharp rise in Singapore's spot electricity prices amid a global power crunch was exacerbated by a reduction in gas supply from Indonesia. Natural gas supply to Singapore from Indonesia has not fully recovered from disruptions in July, according to a news report on 18th of October. We will have to diversify our source of energy, and importing solar power supply from Australia-Asia Power Link is one option on the table. Another is to tap on electricity from Malaysia, which is to kickstart a 2-year trial starting next year to diversify the country's energy supply. We are also part of the Lao PDR, Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore Power Integration Project that is known as a pathfinder to a broader ASEAN power grid system. This will be just somewhat similar to Britain, which imports hydropower from Norway, helping to ensure secure, affordable and sustainable electricity supplies from UK consumers. Nordic Power Exchange, Nordpool, held its first auction in September 2021 to trade electricity on a newly launched interconnector between Norway and Britain as both markets grapple with tight energy supplies. Mr. Speaker, this bill provides further enhancements to the role that EMA plays going forward and with extra powers. My first question is, so in our outreach to the regional supply source and where subsea cables are needed to connect to Singapore, what does it mean for our energy infrastructure demands going forward? How will the evolution of technology in energy infrastructure affect us? And if needed, how much would it cost in terms of actual infrastructure and human capital requirements? Where would this increased landing points to be located as it comes into Singapore? And with the need to invest in capital for the cables and the landing stations, how much more would this add to the cost of consumers, either no matter whether it's private or public built? And what can our government do to mitigate the higher costs going forward, maybe a few decades down the road? Next, could the Minister share with the House how do we ensure the reliability of the energy supply from these external sources? In recent times, we have seen how COVID-19 pandemic disrupted operations in some countries, and so we need to think of contingencies so that we are not caught off guard. Mr. Speaker, in fact, on October 15th, EMA said Singapore's power utilities might have to switch to using LNG because of reduction in piped gas supplies from Indonesia. The resultant effect caused spot electricity futures on SGX to spike on those days. And also this prompted the operator of the LNG terminal, Singapore LNG Corp, to look to boost gas inventory to bolster energy supplies. We need to learn from this and look at how to manage such a scenario. Another question is, if we are going to build up a backup capacity, how long can it last? And do we have multiple sources for this backup? How do we ensure if one supply source is disrupted, the other external sources could still keep the supply flowing? I think some members in the House earlier have mentioned this, but it highlights the point that besides diversity, I think we need to ensure that our external supplies actually do not get disrupted significantly even after diversification. For example, the natural gas supply to Singapore from Indonesia was disrupted in July, and as of October, the supply has not fully recovered. The July disruptions were blamed mainly on an unplanned shutdown at the Anwar field and plant maintenance at the Gajah Baru field, both located in Natuna, according to a report. Production in Natuna is down 27.5% from its previous peak to 370 million standard cubic feet per day. EMA had also said that the disruptions in supply from Indonesia's gas fields in Natuna had contributed to a spike in our spot electricity prices. Open quotes, the recent spike could be attributed to a number of factors, including higher than usual electricity demand, the outage of several generation units, curtailments of gas from West Natuna, as well as low landing pressure of the gas supplied from South Sumatra, the EMA reportedly said. In fact, in February 2020, the Energy and Mineral Resources Ministry of Indonesia had said it would stop gas shipments to Singapore in the next 3 years to cater to domestic demand. Open quotes, gas exports to Singapore will stop in 2023 and we will use the gas for the domestic market. Downstream Oil and Gas Regulatory Agency, BPH Migas head Fanshurullah Asa said, as quoted from Ministry's press release, Indonesia's gas exports to Singapore come from the corridor block, which has a supply of 300 million standard cubic feet per day, and the gas supply will be channeled into the Dumai-Duri transmission pipeline to be distributed to industrial estates in Sumatra, namely the same Mangkes Special Economic Zone in North Sumatra, among other destinations. And also our supply from Malaysia is also another uncertainty. The 18-year deal for delivery of natural gas was expected to start from mid-2006 via a new 5-kilometer pipeline linking Petronas Peninsular Gas Utilisation Pipeline to the Singapore gas transmission system. There is no guarantee that the expiring contract will be renewed. I believe, hence, we are moving to liquefied natural gas as the alternative to fill the vacuum. And this is where new offshore terminals will also add Singapore to a growing list of Asian countries deploying floating infrastructure. So can the Minister give the House an update on this undertaking, and how are we coping with these LNG alternatives? When would LNG likely replace our demand for natural gas for use by Gencos? And what steps are in place to avoid a worst-case scenario? Would it result in any supply shortage that may necessitate a backout of supply to households? At this point, if I could resurface the question whether we should consider using nuclear energy as part of our energy resilience, not within the confines of Singapore, but probably from far afield, for example. This idea is not new, and our founding PM, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, in 2008 had said that he had once considered tapping nuclear energy as the best alternative to fossil fuels for Singapore. If Minister can share his thoughts, please, on this. Next, the bill empowers EMA to acquire, build, own, and operate critical infrastructure, including generation capacity. May I ask, how would EMA play its role if it is both a Genco, wholesaler, and regulator? Would this not open it to a conflict of interest? And I think would be useful if Minister can share on this point. This would only cause the electricity market not to be a level playing field for all participants if you interpret it from a conflict of interest perspective. Lastly, can we also know how soon would EMA be embarking on building capacity and capability to build up its expertise to handle its expanded role in the next 5 to 10 years, especially so when this bill explicitly highlights the fact that EMA's powers will be extended quite largely. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.